From Social Prosperity Partners, this is Community Catalysts. Welcome to Community Catalysts, the podcast that examines the qualities of community leadership and the many paths and forms it can take. I'm your host, Matt Lehrman. Today marks an exciting milestone as we unveil a special series nested within the Community Catalysts podcast. We're thrilled to host the re-release of the Civic Strategies podcast, originally curated and conducted by my guest, Otis White, the former president of Civic Strategies, now retired. Otis, an authority on community decision-making, stands as one of America's foremost analysts and thinkers on civic leadership. Between 2011 and 2015, in collaboration with the Georgia Municipal Association, Otis conducted a series of insightful interviews with 39 influential civic leaders. These conversations captured invaluable and timeless wisdom, spotlighting individuals who achieved significant milestones or honed pivotal skills crucial to civic engagement. As these episodes are no longer accessible anywhere, I extend my heartfelt gratitude to Otis White for graciously permitting us to feature them here in their entirety within the Community Catalysts podcast. Our journey begins today and will continue with an episode re-release on the last Tuesday of every month. I am absolutely delighted to help new generations of community leaders discover the treasure of knowledge and inspiration that Otis gathered. In just a minute, we'll play an episode, but first, Otis White, welcome to Community Catalysts, and thank you for sharing your podcast library with us.
Well, I'm delighted to be here, Matt.
Otis, before I start asking questions, and I told you I have a lot of questions I want to ask you, we owe a quick shout out to our mutual friend, Joe Winter, who introduced us just a year and a half ago. He pointed me to your website, which noted that your business closed in 2019, but that you decided to keep the website up with the hope that it might be helpful to civic and neighborhood leaders. So let me start by repeating what I think I wrote to you in my first email a year and a half ago. I think I wrote, "Thank you. I'm one of the people who you imagined would find this repository of your work all quite valuable. And now, Otis, I get to say thank you on behalf of everyone listening for sharing your podcast and for continuing to make your research and writing available to us all." Otis, I'm going to hit you with a big question right off the bat. Tell me something that you know that's an eternal truth about community decision-making.
An eternal truth about community decision-making is that it is best if we understand each other's roles in it. And I often find it comes to an argument about expertise. And the truth of the matter is we're all experts, but we don't recognize each other's expertise. The citizens are experts in what kind of community they want. And they also experts, by the way, in fairness. But the experts we think of as experts, planners, city department leaders, are experts in something else. They're experts not in the what, but in the how. How, if you describe to me the community you want it to be, they're the folks who can figure out how to get there. But the truth is, there's a little bit of both in each area. That is, we sometimes need the citizens to hear the experts suggesting, have you thought about this as the kind of community you want, introducing new ideas. And we need the citizens to be involved somewhat in the how parts so that we make sure that it's getting exactly to the place that the citizens want. So I guess that's a long-winded, analysis of decision-making, but I think it's something we sometimes forget.
It sounds like what you're saying is everyone has a piece of the answer, but we have to work together to find an answer that works for all or for the most.
Yes.
You led the Atlanta-based consulting firm Civic Strategies for, 22 years?
Yes.
So how would you explain your job to a stranger in a hotel elevator or to an 8-year-old member of your family?
Well, I tried to make cities better by making some of the most important institutions in cities work a little better. And usually they were city governments, chambers of commerce, economic development agencies, civic leagues, business improvement districts, those sorts of things. And my work tended to be around usually three buckets of problems. Number one, the community or the organization was faced with a big and unexpected problem, and it just did not know how to sort of go about addressing this issue. Or secondly, it was a visioning project, and that came to occupy a lot of my time. And it was about to where do we want to go and how do we want to get there? And the third one was just strategic visioning, those strategic planning. Those tended to be the nonprofits that I dealt with or government agencies themselves. And they wanted to know, how can we do what we do better? So those were the three types of problems that I worked on. And that was most of my work.
So what percent of your expertise do you think about as being about process versus policy?
Well, I didn't concentrate much on the policy part. I did not come in as an expert in what this community should do, but I knew who the experts were. They were the citizens. The citizens were the experts. They were the experts on what kind of community they wanted to live in. We just needed to find an appropriate set of questions and an appropriate way of asking them. And they would tell us in great detail what they wanted. And then the process was, how do we take these ideas and put them into some form that then a plan could be created from? So the visioning processes that I worked on usually lasted from 6 to 8 months. And the first 3 months were just going around the community listening to citizens.
Otis, in a prior conversation, you referred to yourself as an urbanist. Could you define what that means to you?
It's just a lover of cities. And usually it involves just liking to be around people. Cities are great if you like people. And so that's my definition of an urbanist, is a lover of cities. It's not about the buildings, by the way. Again, it's about the people.
And in your experience, does urbanism necessarily mean large cities, or are there principles here and insights that are appropriate for small towns as well?
It applies to small towns. It applies to suburbs. It does require some group of people. So rural areas probably wouldn't find much in urbanism, but small towns would.
I want to switch gears and ask you about the podcast itself. When you were producing the Civic Strategies podcast, who did you envision was the intended audience, and what did you expect that the listeners would do with what you were sharing?
One thing I had been working with the Georgia Municipal Association, which is the League of Cities for the state of Georgia. It's a wonderful organization. And I learned something from them, which is when they had their annual convention, mayors and city council members and city managers loved to go to the convention because they love to talk to each other. They learn from each other. This is peer learning in its best. So what I really had in mind was that maybe I could do what I had seen at the annual convention of the Georgia Municipal Association and simply present a little peer learning. So I guess I had in mind that it would be city officials, but it would also just be good citizens who wanted to do something nice for their communities.
There's a lot of confidence to be gained, too, from listening to other people who've been through experiences and can talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly of what they experienced.
Absolutely. So, yes, urbanism kind of grounded me in a little bit of what to look for, i.e., people doing something. What would be a great achievement in a city? But it's one thing to know the right thing to do, and it's quite another to be able to do it. And I was interested in the people who actually could do it, and I wanted to know what they knew. But that was the genesis of the podcast.
Otis, I'm going to ask you a very high-level question here. Are there certain fundamental principles that you consider to be the rock-solid foundation of successful community decision-making processes?
It is, number one, start with the citizens. Ask them first. Number two, ask them the right questions and ask it in the right way. And number three, keep them involved in the process as you begin to make plans, as you begin to make those decisions. Keep them involved in it and check back with them and see, here's what we thought we heard from you. Here's what we are planning to do as a result of it. And are we on the right track? And they will guide you.
You're willing to put a lot of trust into accountability to the residents of a community.
I don't know who else you can trust. Only they know the community they want. And so, yes, that we have to trust the citizens to know what they want and to be able to recognize it when they get it.
You'll hear more from that interview in future episodes, but for now, let's listen to Otis White's Civic Strategies interview with Frank Martin, the former mayor of Columbus, Georgia. Their topic, how to deal with civic self-doubt.
Hello and welcome to Civic Strategies, a podcast about cities and their leaders produced in cooperation with the Georgia Municipal Association. I'm Otis White. On our show today is Frank Martin, former mayor of Columbus, Georgia. People who have visited Columbus in the past 2 decades have been amazed by its transformation, particularly in its downtown. One of the most neglected and abandoned downtowns in the Southeast has become one of the liveliest. It has a great performing arts center, a major downtown branch of its local university, lofts and sidewalk cafes, one of the longest river walks in the country, and soon a whitewater kayaking attraction, all in the middle of a now thriving downtown. But before any of this could happen, something had to change in the attitudes of Columbus residents about their city. Simply put, the citizens were filled with civic self-doubt, and that's where Frank Martin came in. In one eventful term in office, from 1991 to 1995, Mayor Martin raised the citizens' sights in Columbus, created enthusiasm about the city's future, and turned that into tangible projects like the Riverwalk and a host of other improvements. As he was leaving office, the local newspaper wrote about him, "Rarely in the 166-year history of this city has one mayor left with such a remarkable legacy." And with that introduction, welcome, Mayor Martin.
Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be on the show.
Citizens in Columbus did not have a lot of faith in the city when you came to office. Why was that, and how did it complicate what leaders were trying to do and their ability to get it done?
The truth of the matter is we had not had any civic success in Columbus for a very, very long time, perhaps not since Fort Benning was founded in Columbus. I don't think we'd had anything that created any civic pride for generations. And that was just the way it was. When I came into office, we had just had a long civic dry spell. Let me say it that way.
Now, was it just a lack of faith in the city government, or did the doubt go deeper than that?
In my view, and I was born and raised here, it was actually a fairly accurate perception of Columbus by the people here. We didn't have anything to brag about. Nothing had really happened here for generations. And it really was just a very unexciting, dull place, no growth, nothing new going on. Columbus was a textile town, and we just went from generation to generation. And I just had the good fortune to be at the right place at the right time.
When you ran for mayor, did you know that the self-doubt was going to be a problem you were going to have to take on?
Yes, I did. And the reason that I went on and decided to run, I just was tired. I knew I wasn't going to move. I was going to live here all of my life, and I was really just tired of everything being the way it was. And I can't say that I thought that I individually had what it took to change things, but it was just so bad, and it had been so bad for so long, I figured, well, I can't mess things up. They're already bad enough, so why not go ahead, and try to do something. That was really the attitude I had. I thought we just need to give it something a try.
So what did you do? What were the first steps you took, and ultimately, what did you find that worked?
I thought we need a man on the moon project. That's what we need. For about 25 years, we had talked in Columbus about a new civic center. It never got done and never got done, and it never got done. I looked at it and I said, this is going to be the man on the moon project.
And that got some enthusiasm in the community about just progress being made.
The truth is, nobody believed in it when we started. It was like, oh yeah, we've heard this for 20-something years. We proposed a bond issue, and we tied in the Civic Center with a combined sewer overflow project that we had to do. We were mandated by Georgia law to do it. So we had them both on the ballot, and they both passed, and that was the beginning of everything.
That combined sewer overflow project doesn't sound like a very exciting project to raise people's sights, but something happened on top of that did change the way people looked at the city. What was that?
Well, what we did, we went to some of our private foundations here in Columbus and asked them if they would put a river walk on top of the underground combined sewer overflow project. And the long story short is they said yes. Through the good graces of some of our philanthropists here in Columbus, we put a river walk on top of it that actually runs all the way out now to Fort Benning, which is about 10 or 12 miles south of Columbus. We've got this magnificent river walk that runs along the banks of the Chattahoochee on the Georgia side, and we're thrilled to death with that, and we accomplished a mandate at the same time. We were very fortunate.
And the river walk had the effect of introducing people to the river, showing them how a quality project looks, giving them some civic pride, or all of that?
All of that. I'd always said, we had a civic inferiority complex in Columbus, and we were always looking down at our dirty shoes, and we never were looking up at the horizon like what could be. We were always obsessed with us looking down. So when we got the Riverwalk and came into compliance with the combined sewer overflow project, all of a sudden we had people who were beginning, to brag about this and brag about that and talking about Columbus. Maybe we can do this. So I decided that we would go on right then, and we would put another bond issue on the table for a massive rebuild of our civic infrastructure. We renovated our football stadium, built a new baseball stadium, built a softball complex, which just through, again, blind luck and good fortune, it turned out it all coincided with being able to submit a bid for the women's fast-pitch softball.
That was for the 1996 Summer Olympics that took place mostly in Atlanta.
Yeah, but we got the women's fast-pitch softball in Columbus, and we already had the softball complex built. And we had a $22 million a year revenue stream from the bond issue. For us, it wasn't build it and they'll come. For us, we've already built it. Why don't you come? And they took us up on our offer, and we were awarded the women's fast-pitch softball.
So it was a step-by-step process. You went for the moonshot. You did the project that everyone had talked about but had never been able to get done. You married that to another project, which nobody would have been very excited about because it's all underground, but you found a way to build a new civic amenity that people could actually walk on as opposed to admire from a distance.
Yes, and in Columbus, this probably is hard to believe if you're not familiar with Columbus and don't know our layout. The people who had been born and raised here, most of us had never even seen the Chattahoochee River except from the Alabama side over in Russell County in Phoenix City. The textile mills blocked the view for about 6 or 8 blocks. when all of that changed and people could see the river, and we built the river walk, people really, for the first time, got interested in everything because you could actually see the river, walk on the river walk, and see the dams and the water flowing over the dams. And the whole attitude, the civic attitude in Columbus changed. It was almost like discovering something was here forever, and none of us really knew about it.
That was the beginning. So there was enthusiasm there. It went into building softball complexes and other recreational assets. And then the cherry on top of it, was the way that you got a portion of the 1996 Olympics to Columbus, and which must have just unleashed enormous citizen enthusiasm.
It did. We kept getting less and less negative feedback, but even after the first big success, we still had a lot of doubting Thomases. Slowly, we almost got to the point where there were no doubting Thomases anymore. But it took a long time because we had such a bad civic image of ourselves, and nobody believed that we could do anything. And it was a real battle. It really was. It was not easy.
And things continued after you left office. The Performing Arts Center was built, the university moved, a major branch downtown, and the downtown really came to life. So that wave continued after your time in office.
Right. We had the Center for Performing Arts was on the drawing board when I was in the mayor's office, and it was obvious that there was a really good chance that was going to come to fruition, which it did. We were very fortunate. Moving the part of Columbus State University downtown adjacent to our historic section was just a phenomenal stroke of good luck. There was a lot of great leadership by a lot of people that led that to reality, and it has made a huge, huge difference to have 2 or 3 schools at Columbus College downtown. It has been a key part of downtown revitalization, and we have it. We'd have to give tremendous credit to Columbus State University. But before they would buy in to any of that, somebody had to show them something, and that's where the Riverwalk, the Civic Center, and all of that started. Once they saw some tangible proof that this wasn't just all talk, that it was an accomplished fact, it was easier for them to buy in and to argue that also to the Board of Regents, because they had to get permission from the State Board of Regents to move these schools off campus.
Today, self-doubt must be much less than it was when you took office 20 years ago.
Yes, that's absolutely true, and it's because we've been so fortunate. We've had a long string of successes, and so we've been on a roll for a long time now, but it took, believe me, it took a good while to get people to believe that we could actually do these things. The thing that we have in Columbus now, which because historically we were a textile mill town, is due to the growth of Columbus State University and Columbus Vocational Technical School here, we have a middle class. And when I was a young boy here in the 1950s, we didn't have a middle class. I mean, there were rich people here, and then people worked in the textile mill. And now we've got a strong middle class here we didn't have before all of this happened.
If a mayor from another city were to come and sit down with you and say, I've got a very cynical public back home, what can I do to get their attitudes changed and believing in the city, what would you say to them?
I can tell you exactly what I'd say. It's easier said than done. But what I would tell him would be real simple. When you got self-doubt and people who don't believe and are not going to believe because there's no track record of success, it takes a man-on-the-moon project to get negative people to buy in. But if you can get them to buy in and you do it and it's a success, it changes everything. It's the old seeing is believing. That's what it is. And people will not believe if they cannot see it. We had skeptical people, but thank goodness everything went good, and that was the beginning of our huge civic buy-in.
Well, thank you, Mayor Martin. My guest has been Frank Martin, former mayor of Columbus, Georgia, talking about dealing with civic self-doubt. This has been Civic Strategies. I'm Otis White. Thanks for listening.
Otis White, thank you for sharing your insights, your expertise, and especially for sharing this wonderful learning resource with all of us.
Well, my delight.
Again, my sincere thanks and appreciation to Otis White for making his Civic Strategies podcast available here for listeners of Community Catalysts. You'll find a link to his Civic Strategies website in the program notes for this podcast, and I encourage you to make good use of the wealth of insights and resources that he still offers there. This episode was produced by Kerry Lengel and edited by Nick Livin' the Dream Tantillo. Jenna Maisel is our production assistant. Our executive producer is John Little. I'm Matt Lehrman of Social Prosperity Partners. If you have a question, a comment, or a story to share, reach me at 602-688-2724 or podcast at socialprosperity.us. I'd love to hear from you. We'll be back soon with another Community Catalyst.